it was extremely easy to do bootlegging, especially in Westport. There were 4 police. They looked the other way with prohibition. They frankly didn't care to enforce it, but there were 60 stills operating throughout town. And what made Westport and Connecticut so attractive to bootleggers was that Connecticut and Rhode Island were the only 2 states that didn't ratify prohibition at the state level. The guy who controlled rum running in Westport was Jacob Rosenwig. He was part of the Jewish mob in New York City. And Jacob Rosenwig, who became known as Bald Jack Rose, he had alopecia, so he was completely bald. He was from Norwalk, Connecticut. He ran gambling houses and rum running joints in New York City, but he expanded his operations, especially into Westport. He provided booze to 2 of the most famous, well, one was the most famous speakeasy in Westport. Another one was the most famous speakeasy between New York and Boston. So I'll talk about the latter. It was called the Miramar. And George Raft came there, Humphrey Bogart went there, and the Fitzgeralds went there. And in a very fun article in the Westport Herald, there's an article about how Scott and Zelda were going to the Miramar, but they had an accident and the wheel came off their car, which is fun because you can posit that that's the origin of the wheel coming off the car at the Gatsby party in the Great Gatsby. But the other one was the Campo Inn, and it was run by Marion and Jake Levy. They knew Marion quite well. Matter of fact, Guy Pendabois, the guy who came up with the greatest quote of the 20s ever, work was an effort made between parties, painted a picture of Marion Levy and called it the bootlegger's wife. So Scott and Zelda went there, and Jacob Rosenwig, Bald Jack, provided them with their illegal booze. So what's fun, and Barbara posited, and I very much believe this to be the case, she argued that he was the template for Meyer Wolfsheim because especially, and this is what just, I really believe this just as a fact, Bald Jack turned state's evidence against a policeman by the name of Charles Becker. And in 1912, the Charles Becker case was really kind of the OJ case of its day. Charles Becker was a corrupt New York City cop that took kickbacks so as not to hinder, rum running and prohibition. And he actually organized a hit on one of the Jewish mobsters, and Bald Jack Rose turned state's evidence against Charles Becker. Now that's the famous shooting at the Metropole, which actually happened. Fitzgerald references it. Fitzgerald has Wolfsheim reference it. So she argued pretty convincingly. And then when you look at the legal record, that another Westport contribution was to the Great Gatsby was Meyer Wolfsheim. So it's really fun to read. For example, there's several, but there's 2 wonderful headlines. There was a cab that turned turtle, as the Westport Herald discussed it. And what they found was the equivalent of about $250,000 in today's money in booze leaking out of it. It was in the fenders, it was in the headlights, it was in the wheel wells, it was under the seats. And in another one, they stopped a truck that was 2 Jewish mobsters were running up from New York to Hartford. They were probably in the employ of Bald Jack Rose. They stopped that, and they made an absolute killing on the seized booze that was captured there by the Westport cops. But that was a very rare occurrence. As a matter of fact, going back to that other story, it took a car flipping over and crashing for them to even bust those guys, because it was so obvious. So Westport had this wonderful laissez-faire mentality towards prohibition that, again, just to loop back, was really unmatched by any other place that the Fitzgeralds could have ever have gone to, excepting Paris and France and the south of France, where there was no prohibition. What was also a neat fact was that you could buy legally these grape cakes. It was completely legal to buy these. They were, it was kind of a brick, a powdered brick. And what you would do is you basically added that to water. I'm really cutting this down to the basics, and let it ferment, and bingo, you had wine. So, you know, besides getting the prescriptions, right, for the pharmacists to get booze, you could legally buy essentially what was a powdered wine and make it yourself.